of marriage reflecting the union of God with his people to the end, or there is the commitment of the one who has made himself or herself a eunuch for the kingdom of heaven's sake. So the one who gives up this normal expression of sexuality sanctified by God within marriage doesn't give it up just to give it up, but gives it up for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. We had just this past Monday at the liturgy another passage about marriage and also indirectly about virginity from St. Luke. And this time it's the Sadducees, some of the Sadducees. Sadducees are another party. You know, the Pharisees are the caretakers, custodians of the law and of the teaching of the rabbis. The Sadducees are a very privileged class. They are the class of the priests, the priestly families. Some of the Sadducees who deny that there is a resurrection, the Sadducees did not believe that there was going to be a resurrection, came to him and asked him, saying, "Teacher, Moses wrote to us that if a man's brother dies having a wife, and he dies without children, his brother should take his wife and raise up offspring for his brother." And that also in ancient Israel, that law was called the levirate law, that if a man died and he had an unmarried brother, that the brother was in order, and it really in a situation where there was no social welfare as we know it now, and even now it doesn't work very well. But then there was nothing. You know, a widow was very very dependent. So the brother was to take the place of the husband who had died. Now there were 7 brothers. And the first took a wife and died without children, and the second took her as wife, and he died childless. Then the third took her, and in like manner the 7 also, and they left no children and died. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife does she become? For all 7 had her as wife. And Jesus answered and said to them, "The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage." Therefore, marriage is to be understood in its purpose as something that belongs to time, something that belongs to our life in this world. And remember that this world is good, but nevertheless, this world is not going to last forever. The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are counted worthy to attain that age, so there's another age, and the resurrection from the dead, neither marry nor are given in marriage, nor can they die any more. For they are equal to the angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. For God is not the God of the dead, but of the living, for all live to him. So, if we are, when speaking of virginity, I read this passage as a kind of commentary on the Lord's words, that there are those who make themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The tradition of the church has always understood that the purpose of the consecrated life of virginity or celibacy is to be a sign in this world, while time and history still last, of the age to come. That's what it means to embrace that life for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. That though the children of this age marry and are given in marriage, there are those who are called to become eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven and be signs in this world of the age to come. And in their life to reveal, they are to become God's signs, unique signs, not separated from the others, but nevertheless unique signs of that new age when the ordinary expressions of life in this world have been perfected and have passed away. That's why, of course, there's not going to be any more children begotten in the kingdom of God, and everything that is proper to our material life will be transfigured. Yes, we will still, as one priest I know expressed it very well, kind of organically, but it's pretty good expression. Yes, our bodies will be transfigured in the kingdom of God, but that doesn't mean that we're going to go on cutting our fingernails. It's a new life. The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are counted worthy to attain that age cannot die anymore, for they are equal to the angels and are sons of God and sons of the resurrection. St. Paul, and it's this passage that I want to refer to because it's an expression of how the church has understood these two ways of life for 2,000 years now. This is the 7th chapter of the First Epistle to the Corinthians. Let's see what I want here. Concerning the things of which you wrote to me. So he's asking questions that they had asked him, answering questions. It is good for a man not to touch a woman. Now, when we read that, he is not saying that, conversely, it is bad, that marriage is bad. He's answering a question that for those who embrace the virginal life, that is a good thing. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. And then he gives some advice for marital relations. Do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer. And of course, the church has established that rhythm in the fasting seasons. And come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment. For I wish that all men were even as I myself. So St. Paul has definite opinion, at least, and perhaps it's far more than an opinion, over what is better. For I wish that all men were even as I myself. And of course, St. Paul is unmarried, celibate. But each one has his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry. Then he goes on to say, I want you to be without care. He's addressing the unmarried now. He who is unmarried cares for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife. There is a difference between a wife and a virgin. The unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit, not that I may put a leash on you, but for what is proper, and that you may serve the Lord without distraction. So, and then the final verse, that I'll read, which sums it up. So he who gives her, talking about daughter, in marriage does well. See, we must be very clear, because some people have this twisted idea of St. Paul, that he has a thing against marriage. So he who gives her in marriage does well, but he who does not give her in marriage does better. Now, it is the clear, and here we have to be very clear in our understanding of the tradition of the church. Very clear that in these two ways of life that are blessed by the Lord, marriage and consecrated virginity, that the church, the gospel, the New Testament, the saints, the tradition of the church continually has taught that the highest form of life that a Christian can embrace is that of consecrated virginity for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. So we do not understand in our church that that the two ways, and this is it's better for us to express it in the as clearly and directly as possible, and not try to hedge. We don't understand the two ways as equal. We don't. It's not to say that one is good and the other is bad. Rather, it's the words of St. Paul. One is good and the other is better. Now, how are we to understand that, though? First of all, why? As St. Paul says, if the virginity is embraced for love of God and his kingdom, in order that one may be totally at the disposal of the will of God and service of the church, then it is the most perfect expression of how Christ lived in this world. But we have to be very clear that that has to be the reason that it's embraced. If it's embraced out of selfishness in any form, out of a desire to isolate oneself from other people, and we would say, by the way, that even those who physically and geographically isolate themselves from other people, like hermits, if they do not attain, and the hermits themselves would tell us this, if their life does not become, in a very unique way, also an expression of this love of God for all mankind and for his creation, then it is a barren and cursed life. And that's why even within the framework of the monastic life, great care was exercised who was allowed to go off and be a hermit, because the desert fathers and mothers they were wise. They had great experience. There was one story of Saint Theodosius, the abbot in Palestine, that he built at his monastery 3 hospitals. One was for sick pilgrims who came to the monastery. The other was for local people, sick among the local people, and the third one was for insane monks. And the reason why many of them were insane, and this is not speculation, we have plenty of descriptions of this from the time, is they in fact had embraced this life for the wrong reason. And of course, if we embrace either life, marriage or virginity, for the wrong reason, sooner or later it will catch up with us. And then we will have the opportunity to perhaps be cured of what's the matter with us and embrace it for the right reason when it becomes clear to us what we have done. Or else, if we continue on the way that we've gone, especially in the case of someone who thinks that they are living a superior life to everybody else and have gone off as a hermit, fueled by the energy of pride, not love, they'll go nuts. See, so that's why I have to be very careful to say that this higher way of life must be embraced for the love of God, out of the desire to do the will of God in an intense and sacrificial way. Marriage must also be embraced for the same reason. Those who are married have to know, first of all, that this perfect sacrificial love can only come after a lifetime of struggle, can only come after sometimes the expression is used, the first love, that energy of romance, or sometimes even infatuation that people have when they first enter into marriages, the things that kind of gets idolized, in movies and literature. That passes away, though, and then comes the real test as to whether or not the husband and the wife are able to move onward to the second love, which is the deeper love, the love that is the union of souls, the union of spirits, the love that involves sacrifice, the love that involves living with the other, knowing full well that the other one is fallen and sinful, and yet constantly seeking to be the means mutually through which the other is saved. That is the blessed marriage. Now, what happens most of the time, we have to say this, if we are to say that the life of consecrated virginity is it's the way of life to the extent that it is lived as a heroic and generous response to the gospel. That is the higher life. But as we know, whether two people get married, or whether a person decides to give his life to God in virginity, nearly everyone, with maybe the exception of very few, enter into either one of those two lives with a whole mixed bag of motives, because that's how we are. There are a few people who are able to give themselves to one or the other with a great deal of purity of heart from the start. They are the very blessed ones, and it is from them that if in the case if they are married, that the most wonderful expressions of family life come, and if they are virgins, they generally become the great saints, and usually the two go together. As we know, it's Joachim and Anna and Zechariah and Elizabeth that who bring into the world the Theotokos and John the Baptist. It's Basil the Great and his sister and his brothers who are saintly children in a saintly family going back from generations. There's a read you a little story. This is one of my favorite stories. It's the beginning of the early years of the life of Saint Bernard. Saint Bernard lived in the 12th century, and he lived in the West, but still at this time you can't say that the division between the Greek and Latin Church had been completed. So he's one of the great monastic saints of the West. But this is the story of his upbringing and what brought him to, in his case, the monastic life. Saint Bernard was the third son of Tescalin Sorel, a Burgundian noble, and Aleth, who was daughter of Bernard, Lord of Montbard. So that's his background. He was born in 1090 in Fontaine, a castle near Dijon, a lordship belonging to his father. So they're of the nobility. His parents had 7 children: Guy, Gerard, Bernard, Humbeline, Andrew, Bartholomew, and Nivard, 6 boys and 1 girl. They were all well educated and learned Latin and verse-making before the sons were applied to military exercise and feats of arms. But Bernard was sent to Châtillon on the Seine to pursue a complete course of studies in a college of secular priests. He even then loved to be alone, largely at first because of shyness. His progress in learning was far greater than could be expected from one of his age, and he was soon alert to listen to what God by his holy inspiration spoke to his heart. It goes on to say, as he grew up, Bernard made his appearance in the world with all the advantages and talents which can make it attractive to a young man, or which could make him loved by it. His personal attractiveness and wit, his affability of temper, endeared him to everybody. In these very advantages lay his chief danger. and for a time there was serious risk of his becoming lukewarm and indifferent. That's an interesting statement. We've all known in our lives various personalities, different people, and most people can think of one or two people that they know who, as far as it seems, almost everybody loves or likes. You can't think of really anyone who would dislike this person. I bet you most of you could think of one or two people like that in your life. I certainly can. But it's interesting that those people who are lovable to everybody, they have a kind of cross of their own, that they have to bear, because very often the demands and expectations that people make of them are sometimes more than they can bear. Anyhow, that's just a thought. So Bernard began to think of forsaking the world and study. And study greatly attracted him, and of going to the monastery at Citeaux, where had been established that strict interpretation of the rule of Saint Benedict. The rule of Saint Benedict is the monastic rule of the West. So this particular monastery was a reformed monastery where they tried to go back to the original intent, live very strict life. He wavered for some time in his mind, and one day in great anxiety he went into a church by the road and prayed that God would direct him to discover and follow his will. He arose steadily fixed in the resolution of following the severe monastic life. His friends tried to dissuade him from it, but he not only remained firm, he enlisted 4 of his brothers as well, and an uncle. Hugh of Macon, an intimate friend, wept bitterly at the thought of separation, but by 2 talks was induced to become his companion. Nor were these the only ones who with apparently no previous thought of the monastic life, suddenly decided to leave the world for the austere life of the monastery of Citeaux. Bernard induced in all 31 men to follow him. He who himself had been uncertain of his call only a few weeks before. It is a happening unparalleled in Christian history. Bernard's eloquent appeals were irresistible. Mothers feared for their sons, wives for their husbands, lest they came under the sway of that compelling voice and look. They assembled at Châtillon, and on the day appointed for their meeting, Bernard and his brothers went to Fontaine to take farewell of their father and beg his blessing. They left Nivard, the youngest brother, to be a comfort to the old father in his old age. Going out, they saw him playing with other children, and Guy said to him, "Farewell, my little Nivard. You will have all the estates and lands to yourself." The boy answered, "What? You then take heaven and leave me only the earth. The division is too unequal." They went away, but soon after Nivard followed them, so that of the whole family there only remained in the world the old father and his daughter Humbeline. And Humbeline ended up becoming a nun. So, now, I'm not reading this to as an expression that everybody is supposed to go do something like this. What it does illustrate very beautifully is that these people, the Bernard and his brothers and uncles and friends, what they do have in common is this very, very healthy Christian family life. And it's what makes this possible. This doesn't come out of nowhere, you see. That even though it happens in a very short period of time, saints like this, as it likewise with Saint Basil and his friend and his brothers and sister and his parents and grandparents, saints do come in clusters. And that is because celibacy and marriage have this mutually dependent relationship where family life, where Christian life within the context of marriage is being lived the way it's supposed to be lived, and people are struggling to live sacrificial lives and to love in the way that Christ loves us. And that doesn't mean that they succeed perfectly from the beginning, and it doesn't mean that they can't do it that they can do it without a lot of struggle. But where it's being done that's where, for the most part, people who are the freest to offer themselves to be eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven and signs in this world of the life of the age to come, they derive by the grace of God. The grace of God, there's a saying, grace builds on nature. And where married life is healthiest, virginal life is also going to be the healthiest, and vice versa. Because then, and this has been the experience of the church throughout the ages, where the virginal life is giving the witness that God intends for it to give, the married people are strengthened by that. So all together progress to this life of purity of heart, to which we're all called. Now, I mentioned a few moments ago, before I read this, that people come to the life they have chosen, and by the way, this is, and when I say this, I'm expressing an opinion that I have. It's not I don't think this is not to be understood dogmatically or anything. It seems to me that one of the ways that one knows, one never really completely knows, because always we walk by faith and not by sight. One of the ways that one knows to which of these lives one is being called is when it begins to take form in a specific situation. I think that people who are in love with the idea of being married, or in love with the idea of the monastic life, I think they all have a long way to go, because you can't marry an idea, and you can't give yourself sacrifice marriage and embrace the celibate life for an idea. It's got to be personified, is what I'm saying. We can't be in love with marriage. When people find that they are drawn in love toward each other specifically, that's when it becomes real. When a person who is going to respond to the call of God to virginity and celibacy, when that becomes real, is when it goes beyond the idea and becomes a real expression of the union between God and the soul of the person. So that's one thing. The other thing, though, is and by the way, another consideration. One never knows completely whether or not one is making the right choice, whether it's marriage, whether it's celibacy. There's always an element, and a very central element, of faith. If one were to wait for some particular time when one can say, well, now I'm really sure, usually that time will never come. It always takes a leap. That's why it's been the understanding of the church that although there's a variable cultural factor for this, this decision that every member of the church is called to make for one life or the other, there's no cutoff point. One must make this decision before one is so old, but nevertheless, it has always been understood in the church that one cannot live out one's entire life without making this decision, saying, well, I really don't know which life I'm going to choose in order to serve God and to attain purification of heart and live this life of crucified self-sacrifice, which is the only way to life. The danger is